I never thought I'd be sitting in a courtroom, watching my own daughter try to steal from the grandson I raised. But there I was, my weathered hands gripping the wooden bench, as Caroline's lawyer stood up with a stack of papers that could destroy everything. "Your Honor," Benjamin Cross announced, his voice sharp as broken glass, "my client, Caroline Mitchell, is the biological mother of Ethan Mitchell. She has never legally relinquished her parental rights, making her the rightful guardian of this minor child and his substantial assets." My heart stopped. Beside me, 17-year-old Ethan sat perfectly still, his fingers tapping that familiar pattern on his knee, the same rhythm he'd used since he was 7 years old when he was thinking hard about something. Our lawyer, Patricia Wells, shuffled through her papers with shaking hands. "Furthermore," Cross continued, "Mr. Harold Mitchell has been acting as an unauthorized caretaker for the past 10 years. While we appreciate his efforts, the law is clear. Parental rights supersede grandparental care arrangements, especially when significant financial assets are involved." $4.2 million. That's what Ethan's app had sold for just 3 months ago. Mind Bridge, he called it, an app that helped kids like him communicate better with the world. Now that money sat in a trust account, and my daughter wanted every penny. Caroline sat behind her lawyer, wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She looked nothing like the broken young woman who'd left Ethan on my doorstep 10 years ago, sobbing that she couldn't handle having a broken child. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her posture confident. She'd transformed herself into someone who looked like she belonged in a courtroom fighting for her son. But I remembered the real Caroline, the one who'd screamed at 7-year-old Ethan for stimming during her favorite TV show, the one who'd locked him in his room when he had meltdowns, the one who'd told me she wished he'd never been born. "Your Honor," Patricia stood up, her voice much quieter than Cross's. "While it's true that formal adoption papers were never filed, Mr. Mitchell has been Ethan's primary caregiver for a decade. He's provided housing, education, medical care, and emotional support. Surely that counts for something." Cross smiled like a shark. "Emotional attachment doesn't override legal reality, Your Honor. Miss Mitchell was young and overwhelmed when she temporarily placed Ethan with his grandfather. She's now in a stable position to resume her parental responsibilities." Temporarily placed. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Caroline had abandoned Ethan after his autism diagnosis, disappearing for 10 years without a single phone call, birthday card, or Christmas present. Now she was calling it a temporary placement. "I'd like to present evidence of Miss Mitchell's current stability," Cross said, pulling out more documents. "She's completed parenting classes, undergone psychological evaluation, and has secured appropriate housing for a special needs child." I watched Caroline nod solemnly, playing the part of a reformed mother perfectly. But I caught the quick glance she shot at Cross when she thought no one was looking. Calculating, cold, focused entirely on the money. Patricia leaned over to whisper in my ear, and her words made my blood run cold. "Harold, I have to be honest with you. We might lose this." The courtroom seemed to spin around me. Lose Ethan? After 10 years of bedtime stories, doctor appointments, coding lessons, and quiet moments watching him grow into an extraordinary young man? After celebrating his first successful app, his acceptance into MIT's early admission program, his breakthrough moments when he'd look me in the eye and smile? I felt Ethan's hand touch my arm gently. He leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "Grandpa, just let her talk." His words confused me. Let her talk? We were fighting for his future, his money, his very life with me. How could letting Caroline talk possibly help us? But Ethan's eyes held something I'd learned to recognize over the years. That look he got when he saw patterns others missed, when his unique mind had figured out something the rest of us couldn't see yet. It was the same look he'd had when he'd solved coding problems that stumped programmers twice his age. "Mr. Mitchell, The judge addressed me directly. You've heard the petitioner's claims. How do you respond to the assertion that you've been acting as an unauthorized guardian? I stood up slowly, my knees creaking after 72 years of hard living. Your Honor, I've been Ethan's grandfather, his protector, and his family for 10 years. When Caroline left him with me, she said she was going to the store for milk. That was in 2014. The milk's still missing. A few people in the courtroom chuckled, but Caroline's face remained stone cold. Cross whispered something in her ear, and she nodded. Your Honor, Cross interjected. My client was dealing with postpartum depression and the overwhelming challenges of raising a special needs child alone. She made the difficult decision to ensure Ethan had proper care while she sought treatment and stability. Postpartum depression. Ethan had been 7 when she left, not 7 months. But Cross delivered the lie with such conviction that I saw the judge's expression soften slightly. Patricia stood again. Your Honor, we request time to prepare our response to these claims. This petition was filed with very short notice, and we need to gather evidence of Mr. Mitchell's decade of dedicated care. Motion denied, the judge said firmly. This matter involves a minor child and substantial assets. We'll proceed today. My heart sank. We weren't ready for this fight. Caroline and her lawyer had planned this ambush perfectly, waiting until Ethan's app money was secured before making their move. But as Cross began presenting his next set of documents, I noticed Ethan pull out his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with the same precision he used for coding, and that familiar calm expression settled over his face. Whatever he was planning, I had to trust him. After all, this brilliant boy had surprised me every day for 10 years. The question was, would his plan be enough to save us both? 10 years ago, I thought my life was winding down. At 62, I was enjoying retirement, fixing furniture in my garage workshop, and looking forward to quiet golden years. Then Caroline showed up at my door with 7-year-old Ethan, 2 garbage bags of his clothes, and tears streaming down her face. I can't do this anymore, Dad, she'd sobbed, practically shoving Ethan toward me. He's too much. The doctors say he's autistic, and I can't handle it. I need some time to figure things out. Ethan stood there clutching a worn stuffed elephant, his dark eyes darting everywhere except at the people talking about him. He was small for his age, all sharp angles and nervous energy, his hands flapping slightly at his sides in a way that seemed to calm him. Caroline, you can't just leave him here, I'd said, but she was already backing toward her car. What about his school, his doctors, his routine? You'll figure it out, she called back. You raised me, didn't you? I'll be back when I get my head straight, I promise. That promise lasted exactly 3 days. On day 4, her phone was disconnected. By the end of the week, her apartment was empty. Caroline had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed, leaving behind only a confused little boy who kept asking when Mommy was coming back. Those first months were the hardest of my life. Ethan barely spoke, and when he did, it was usually to repeat things he'd heard on TV, or to ask the same questions over and over. When is Mommy coming back? When is Mommy coming back? He'd rock back and forth for hours, humming the same tune. And if I tried to interrupt his routine, he'd have meltdowns that left us both exhausted. I knew nothing about autism. The word scared me, honestly. I imagined institutions and limitations and a future full of struggle. But as weeks turned into months, I started seeing past the diagnosis to the remarkable little boy underneath. Ethan noticed everything. He could tell me exactly how many steps it took to walk from the kitchen to his bedroom. 43 and a half, if you counted the half step on the threshold. He memorized the schedule of every TV show he liked and could predict which commercial would come next. When my old computer started acting up, he watched me struggle with it for exactly 10 minutes before quietly saying, "The blue wire is loose." He was right. A 7-year-old had diagnosed a computer problem that had stumped me for weeks. By his 8th birthday, Ethan had settled into our routine. Breakfast at exactly 7:15. Scrambled eggs. No toast touching the eggs. Orange juice in the blue cup. School pickup at 3:20. Never 3:15 or 3:25. Homework at the kitchen table while I cooked dinner. Bedtime story at 8:30 sharp. The school wanted to put him in special education classes, but I fought them. Ethan was different, not broken. When his teacher complained that he wouldn't participate in group activities, I explained that he was listening and learning, just in his own way. When they said he was disruptive because he corrected their math mistakes, I suggested they double-check their work. It was around age 9 that I first noticed his gift with computers. He'd sit at my old desktop for hours, not playing games like other kids, but watching coding tutorials on YouTube. His fingers would dance across the keyboard with a precision that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Grandpa," he said one evening, "I think I can make the computer do things." "What kind of things?" "Better things. Easier things. Things that help people like me." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I bought him programming books for his 10th birthday. By 11, he was building simple apps. By 12, he was teaching himself languages I'd never heard of: Python, JavaScript, Swift. The medical bills were crushing us. Ethan's therapy sessions, special tutoring, and doctor visits ate through my retirement savings faster than I could have imagined. My pension covered our basic needs, but barely. I started taking odd carpentry jobs again, my arthritic hands protesting every nail I hammered. Ethan noticed, of course. He always noticed everything. "Grandpa, are we poor?" he asked one night, when I was hunched over bills at the kitchen table. "We're managing, buddy. Don't worry about grown-up stuff." But he did worry. I could see it in the way he started asking for less, eating smaller portions, wearing clothes until they were practically falling apart. It broke my heart that this brilliant, sensitive boy was carrying burdens no child should bear. That's when his coding became more serious. At 13, he wasn't just building apps for fun anymore. He was building them with purpose. He studied other successful apps, analyzed what made them work, and started sketching ideas in notebooks he carried everywhere. "I'm going to help us, Grandpa," he announced one day, with the quiet determination that had become his trademark. "I'm going to build something important." I believed him. How could I not? This was the boy who'd taught himself calculus from library books, who'd fixed our neighbor's computer network when their tech support couldn't figure it out, who saw solutions where others saw only problems. The breakthrough came when Ethan was 15. He'd been working on something he called MindBridge for months, testing it with other kids from his autism support group, refining it based on their feedback. The app helped autistic individuals communicate more effectively by translating their thoughts into different formats: visual, auditory, or text-based. "Look, Grandpa," he said, showing me the prototype on his laptop. "Tommy can't talk when he's overwhelmed, but he can draw. The app takes his drawings and turns them into words his mom can understand. And Sarah gets confused by facial expressions, so it shows her what different emotions look like and what they mean." I watched him demonstrate the app, and for the first time in years, I felt hope instead of worry. This wasn't just a clever program. It was a bridge between two worlds, built by someone who understood both sides. But I never imagined it would change our lives so completely, or that success would bring its own dangers. Caroline had been watching from the shadows, waiting for exactly this moment. The first time Ethan showed me the completed MindBridge app, I knew we were looking at something special. He was 16 then, hunched over his laptop at our kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and crumpled notebook pages covered in his precise handwriting. "It's ready, Grandpa," he said, his voice carrying that quiet excitement he got when he'd solved a particularly challenging problem. "I've tested it with 47 different users over the past 6 months. The communication success rate improved by 83%. I watched him navigate through the app's interface. It was beautiful in its simplicity, clean, intuitive, designed by someone who understood exactly what users needed because he was one of them. The app could translate emotions into colors, convert spoken words into visual patterns, and help nonverbal individuals express complex thoughts through symbol combinations. How does it work exactly? I asked, settling into the chair beside him. Ethan's eyes lit up the way they always did when he talked about his coding. See, most communication apps treat autism like a deficit to overcome. But autism isn't broken neurotypical thinking. It's a different operating system entirely. MindBridge doesn't try to fix us. It translates between operating systems. He demonstrated with a video call to Tommy, one of his beta testers. Tommy was 14 and hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years, but through MindBridge, he was having animated conversations with his family, using a combination of drawings, symbols, and gesture recognition. Tommy's mom cried the first time she understood what he was really thinking, Ethan told me after the call ended. She said it was like meeting her son for the first time. I felt that familiar surge of pride, mixed with amazement. This brilliant boy had taken his own struggles and transformed them into something that could help thousands of others. But I also felt a nagging worry about what came next. What's your plan for it? I asked. I want to make it available to everyone who needs it, Ethan said simply. But the server costs for the AI processing are expensive. I need funding to scale it properly. That's when he told me about the app development competition he'd entered. The winner would receive mentorship from tech industry leaders and potential investment opportunities. I helped him prepare his presentation, watching him practice in our living room until he could explain MindBridge's features without stumbling over the technical details. The competition was held at the State University, and I drove Ethan there in my old pickup truck, both of us nervous but excited. He was the youngest presenter by at least 3 years, but when he took the stage, something magical happened. His usual social anxiety disappeared, replaced by passionate confidence as he demonstrated how MindBridge could change lives. The judges were mesmerized. One of them, a woman from a major tech company, had tears in her eyes as Ethan showed a video testimonial from a young girl who'd used the app to tell her parents she loved them for the first time. We won. Not just the competition, but something much bigger. 3 different companies approached Ethan that day with offers to license or purchase MindBridge. The numbers they mentioned made my head spin. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions. Grandpa, Ethan whispered to me as we sat in the university parking lot afterward, I think we're going to be okay. The next few months were a whirlwind. Lawyers, contracts, negotiations, all handled through Patricia Wells, who'd been our family attorney since Caroline left. Ethan insisted on maintaining control of MindBridge's core mission, turning down offers that would have changed the app's accessibility or pricing structure. Money isn't the point, he told one particularly aggressive buyer. If I wanted money, I'd build games with in-app purchases. This is about helping people like me communicate with people like you. Finally, TechBridge Solutions made an offer that met all of Ethan's requirements. They would purchase MindBridge for $4.2 million, with Ethan retaining creative control and a guarantee that the basic version would always remain free for families who couldn't afford the premium features. The day the contract was signed, I sat in Patricia's office watching my 17-year-old grandson calmly review legal documents that would set us up for life. The boy who'd arrived at my door with nothing but a stuffed elephant and 2 garbage bags of clothes was now a millionaire. What do you want to do first? I asked him as we drove home. Fix the roof, he said immediately, and get you a new truck. And maybe we could afford better internet so I can work on my next project. That was Ethan. Even with millions of dollars, his first thoughts were practical improvements to our daily life. No fancy cars or expensive gadgets, just the simple desire to make our small world a little better. But success brought unexpected attention. Local news stations wanted interviews. Tech blogs wrote articles about the teenage autism app genius. Social media posts about MindBridge went viral, with thousands of families sharing stories about how the app had helped their children communicate. I started noticing strange cars parked across from our house. Reporters, mostly, but also people I didn't recognize just sitting and watching. Ethan handled the attention with his usual calm, giving interviews when he felt they would help spread awareness about autism and communication challenges. "I'm not an inspiration," he told one particularly pushy journalist. "I'm just someone who saw a problem and built a solution. That's what programmers do." The money was placed in a trust account, managed by Patricia and a financial advisor she recommended. Ethan couldn't access the full amount until he turned 18, but there was enough available for our immediate needs and his college expenses. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about medical bills or whether we could afford groceries. Ethan was thriving, already accepted to MIT's early admission program, and MindBridge was helping families around the world. I should have known it was too good to last. The first sign of trouble came 3 months after the sale, when my phone rang at 7 in the morning. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in 10 years. "Hi, Dad." Caroline's voice was bright and cheerful, as if she'd just talked to me yesterday, instead of abandoning us a decade ago. "I saw the news about Ethan's app. I'm so proud of him. Of both of you." My blood ran cold. After 10 years of silence, Caroline was calling the day after a major tech blog featured Ethan's story. She was coming back. Caroline's phone call should have prepared me, but nothing could have readied me for the woman who showed up at our door 2 weeks later. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, confident smile. The broken young mother who'd fled 10 years ago had been replaced by someone who looked like she belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. "Hello, Dad," she said, as if she'd just returned from a weekend trip instead of abandoning her son for a decade. "You look good. Retirement suits you." Behind her stood a man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. He was tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Everything about him screamed lawyer. "This is Benjamin Cross," Caroline said, stepping into our living room without invitation. "He's helping me with some legal matters." Ethan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the unfamiliar voices. He stopped dead when he saw Caroline, his hands beginning that familiar flapping motion that meant he was processing something overwhelming. "Ethan," Caroline's voice went soft and motherly, an act so convincing I almost believed it myself. "Look how tall you've gotten. You're practically a man now." Ethan said nothing, just stared at her with those dark eyes that missed nothing. I could see him cataloging every detail: her clothes, her posture, the way she held herself differently than the mother he remembered. "What do you want, Caroline?" I asked, stepping protectively closer to Ethan. Cross opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Mitchell, we're here to discuss Ethan's guardianship situation and the management of his recent financial windfall." "His what?" I felt my chest tighten. "Dad," Caroline sat down on our couch, like she still lived here. "I know you've done an amazing job with Ethan, but he's about to turn 18, and there are important decisions to make about his future. College, his money, his care, these are parental responsibilities. You gave up those responsibilities 10 years ago," I said, my voice harder than I intended. Cross cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Mitchell, that's not legally accurate. Miss Mitchell never formally relinquished her parental rights. You've been acting as a temporary caregiver, which we deeply appreciate. But Caroline remains Ethan's legal guardian." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Temporary caregiver? I've raised him for 10 years. And we're grateful," Caroline said, reaching toward Ethan, who stepped back instinctively. "But I'm his mother. I've gotten my life together now. I've completed parenting courses, undergone psychological evaluation, and I'm in a position to provide for Ethan's needs." I looked at Cross, who was watching this performance with calculating eyes. What kind of needs are we talking about? Well, Caroline glanced at Cross before continuing. Ethan's autism requires specialized care. There are excellent facilities that can help him manage his condition while protecting his assets. Places where he can be safe and supervised. Facilities? The word came out as a growl. You want to put him in an institution? Not an institution, Cross corrected smoothly. A residential care facility for high-functioning autistic adults. Somewhere he can receive proper supervision while his financial affairs are managed responsibly. I felt sick. They weren't here for Ethan. They were here for his money. Caroline had spent 10 years building a new life, probably accumulating debts and expensive tastes, and now she saw her autistic son as a lottery ticket. Ethan doesn't need supervision, I said. He's going to MIT in the fall. He built a multi-million-dollar app. He's more capable than most adults I know. Dad? Caroline's voice took on a patronizing tone. I know you love him, but autism is a serious condition. Ethan needs professional care, not just grandparental affection, and his money needs proper management. $4 million is a lot of responsibility for someone with his limitations. That's when I saw it. The flash of pure greed in her eyes when she mentioned the money. This wasn't about Ethan's welfare. This was about Caroline seeing dollar signs and deciding she wanted her cut. Cross pulled out more papers. We've prepared a transition plan. Caroline will resume guardianship, and Ethan will be placed in a care facility that specializes in his needs. His assets will be managed by a professional financial team to ensure his long-term security. A team that you recommend, I'm sure, I said. Cross smiled that cold smile again. We only want what's best for Ethan. Throughout this entire conversation, Ethan had remained silent, but I could see his mind working. His fingers were moving in patterns against his leg, not his usual stimming, but something more deliberate. He was thinking, planning, processing this threat with the same methodical approach he used for coding problems. What if I refuse? I asked. Then we'll file for emergency guardianship, Cross said matter-of-factly. Caroline is Ethan's biological mother with legal standing. You're an elderly man with no formal custody arrangement. The court will side with the biological parent, especially when significant assets are involved. Caroline leaned forward, her mask of maternal concern slipping slightly. Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want what's best for my son. Your son? I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. Where were you when he had nightmares every night for 6 months after you left? Where were you when he learned to ride a bike? Or when he won his first coding competition? Or when he cried because other kids called him weird? I was getting better, Caroline said defensively. I was dealing with my issues so I could be the mother he deserves. For 10 years, Cross stood up, clearly wanting to end this conversation before Caroline said something that damaged their case. Mr. Mitchell, we'll be filing the necessary paperwork tomorrow. I'd advise you to get legal representation. As they prepared to leave, Ethan finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. Mom, why didn't you ever call? Caroline froze, her practiced composure cracking for just a moment. I wanted to give you space to heal. I thought it would be easier for you. Ethan nodded slowly, as if filing away her answer for future reference. Okay, thank you for explaining. After they left, I sat heavily in my chair, feeling every one of my 72 years. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I should have made the guardianship official years ago. But Ethan was already at his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard with unusual intensity. What are you doing? I asked. He looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Calm, determined, and slightly dangerous. Research, Grandpa. Just research. The courtroom felt different when we returned the next day. The Cross had filed his emergency petition overnight, and Judge Morrison was clearly taking this case seriously. Caroline sat behind her lawyer looking every inch the concerned mother, while Ethan and I faced the very real possibility of being separated forever. Your Honor, Cross began, we've prepared additional evidence of Miss Mitchell's fitness as a parent and Mr. Harold Mitchell's limitations in caring for a special needs child. He presented a folder thick with documents, Caroline's psychological evaluations, parenting class certificates, financial statements showing her stability, and most damaging of all, a report from a so-called expert who'd never met Ethan but claimed he needed professional supervision. Patricia looked overwhelmed. She'd done her best, but Cross was playing in a different league entirely. When she stood to present our case, her voice shook slightly. Your Honor, Harold Mitchell has provided loving, stable care for Ethan for 10 years. The boy has thrived under his guardianship, achieving remarkable success both academically and professionally. Success that now requires proper management, Cross interrupted smoothly. A 17-year-old with autism cannot be expected to handle millions of dollars responsibly. He needs professional guidance. Judge Morrison looked directly at Ethan. Young man, do you understand what's happening here? Ethan stood up slowly, his hands steady at his sides. Yes, Your Honor. My mother wants custody of me and control of my money. Ethan, Caroline said sharply. That's not. Just let her talk, Your Honor, Ethan said calmly, his eyes never leaving the judge's face. I'd like to hear what she has to say. Cross shot Caroline a warning look, but she was already speaking, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack under pressure. I want what's best for my son, she said, her voice rising slightly. He's made a lot of money, and he needs someone who understands how to manage it properly. My father is old, and he doesn't understand the complexities of... The complexities of what? Ethan asked quietly. Of managing wealth, of protecting assets, of making sure you're not taken advantage of. Caroline's composure was slipping fast. You're autistic, Ethan. You don't understand how people will try to use you. Like you're trying to use me now? The courtroom went dead silent. Cross grabbed Caroline's arm, trying to stop her, but she was beyond listening. I'm your mother, she snapped. I have rights. I gave birth to you, and I deserve. You deserve what, exactly? Ethan's voice remained perfectly calm. You left me when I was 7. You never called, never wrote, never sent a birthday card. But now that I have money, suddenly you remember you have a son. That's not fair, Caroline said, tears starting to flow. I was sick. I was overwhelmed. I needed time to get better. 10 years? Yes, it took 10 years to get my life together. And now I'm ready to be your mother again. Cross was frantically trying to signal Caroline to stop talking, but she was in full meltdown mode now, all her practiced composure gone. I've worked so hard to get to this point, she continued, her voice becoming shrill. I've taken classes, I've seen therapists, I've done everything right, and now I deserve to benefit from... She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd just said. Benefit from what? Judge Morrison asked, leaning forward. Caroline's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Cross stood up quickly. Your Honor, my client is emotional and misspoke. No, Ethan said, pulling out his phone. She said exactly what she meant. Your Honor, may I present evidence? He approached the bench and handed his phone to the judge. This is a recording of a conversation between my mother and Mr. Cross from yesterday evening. I believe it clarifies their true intentions. Judge Morrison listened to the recording, her expression growing darker with each passing second. Even from where I sat, I could hear Caroline's voice clearly. How much can we get? What's my cut? When can we access the money? And Cross's response, once we have guardianship, we can place him in a facility and manage his assets. Standard management fees are 20% annually, plus expenses. The judge looked up from the phone, her face stern. Mr. Cross, Did you advise your client to pursue guardianship primarily for financial gain? Cross's confident demeanor crumbled. Your Honor, that conversation was taken out of context. The context seems quite clear, Judge Morrison said coldly. She turned to Ethan. Young man, how did you obtain this recording? I've been recording all our interactions since they first contacted us. Ethan said simply, I learned a long time ago that people often reveal their true intentions when they think no one important is listening. I have 17 hours of recordings documenting their plans to institutionalize me and control my money. Caroline was crying openly now, her mask completely gone. Ethan, please. I'm your mother. I love you. No, Ethan said quietly. You love my money. There's a difference. Judge Morrison set down the phone and looked around the courtroom. I've heard enough. Miss Mitchell, your petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Cross's conduct in this matter. She turned to me with a slight smile. Mr. Harold Mitchell, I'm granting you formal legal guardianship of Ethan, retroactive to the date he was placed in your care. The court recognizes that you have been his true parent in every way that matters. As Caroline and Cross hurried from the courtroom in defeat, Ethan sat down beside me and took my hand. How did you know? I asked him. He smiled that quiet smile I'd come to love so much. I told you, Grandpa. I just let her talk. People always tell you who they really are if you give them enough rope. We walked out of that courtroom together, a family made stronger by the attempt to tear us apart.